My name is Miguel Rivera, and I was born in Guatemala. And I grew up in a household where my father was a doctor, my mother was a nurse. One of my uncles was also a surgeon. So everything in my family was all related to healing. When we were kids, it was an old colonial style Spanish house in Quetzaltenango, the city where I'm from. And every day we had a big three courtyards in the house. And the front courtyard had a big rosemary bush. So my grandmother was really keen on getting the ghosts out of the house. So every day at noon, we had our job as kids from grammar school. We'd come home from school was to go get all the ghosts out of the house. So she would make us take coals from the cooking stove, put them in some sort of a metal container, whatever she could get a hold of, and we would run through that, grab a handful of rosemary from the bush, throw it in the coals, and go through all the rooms in the house. And this was my first experience with plants, was basically changing. I understood it much later, was changing the energy signature of the house, purifying it. So that was my relationship to plants. I moved to the United States when I was 13 years old, and basically spent 2 years working in a hospital, and I realized that that modality was not necessarily adapted for who I was as an individual. I knew that I was going to be working, helping people. I just didn't know how. I ended up becoming a musician, and along the way, I started exploring different modes of modality to heal them. And I got interested when at the time I was living in Boulder, Colorado, and I got interested in just reading all kinds of literature about anything that could help change consciousness, to see what was different in the world. So one of the first books that I read that was interesting to me and on that level was Secret Life of Plants by Peter Tompkins. So I got interested in plants. I started collecting ferns. I had all kinds of ferns and insectivorous plants. And I had a house it was basically a laboratory greenhouse. I would talk to the plants, play all kinds of music to them, and see what kind of effects. But mostly I was not interested in craziness with the plants, but I was more interested in what kind of reaction. I played a lot of jazz, and the plants seemed to like jazz. So a lot of John Coltrane, things like that. So a few years later, I ended up in LA, in Los Ángeles, California, and I had the opportunity to spend time with Native American elders. They were recruiting young people that were interested in learning what they taught. And so one of the first things that we started participating in the ceremonies. And for Native peoples, in particular, my teachers, a basic relationship with plants is utmost important. One of the first tasks that we did, we had to go learn what qualities each plant that's used as medicine has. So everything that we do always involves using a variety of plants: sage, sweetgrass, cedar, or the primary plants that we use in order to prepare for a ceremony. They each have a particular signature, and they change the vibrational field of the individual. So one year, we had committed to go participate in a ceremony, and it was a Sundance, and the task was to go out and cut sage. But the intercessor at the time was very emphatic that we had to talk to the plants and get permission from the plants to be used. So we found this field, this three of us that were participating in the ceremony, and the instructions were to find what looks like the leader plant, talk to the leader plant, make an offering, a tobacco in that case at that time, and then leave that plant alone, and then go off and find and get sage from the rest of the plant. And so we actually stood there in front of the group of plants and started talking to the plants. And it was the first time that I actually directly addressed a plant. When I was collecting carnivorous plants and ferns, I was used to talking to them, but not on that level as a personal friend, because this is really, you have to think about the plants as relatives, as part of their family. And that was the thing that had changed from 5 or 6 years before to that time. So I stood there for a long time in front of this group of sage plants and started telling them what we were going to do. And the purpose of the Sundance really is for the renewal of life. So I was saying to the plants, we are going to go out there and fast and sing and pray for a few days. And we want to basically pray for the renewal of life, so that it comes to not only the following year, but for the following generations. And so I closed my eyes and I remember feeling something. And all of a sudden, when I opened up my eyes again, there was a shimmering vibration there. And I could hear something that sounded like, I could feel an energy in my brain, right, or in my field. And after I understood what it was, I could feel the shimmering over the plants. And what I could and translate after I stood there for a while was, me, I want to go. Take me, I want to go. And all the plants were like shimmering. You could see their leaves changing like that. So during that time, the ceremony, the Sundance, involves being able to fast and pray for a number of days, hours, depending on how it's structured. But you have to pray around the tree. And for me, the experience of when I first stood in front of that tree the very first time, I danced for 5 years. And it's very moving for me because I'll never know as a man what it is to carry life inside of me. But one of the functions of the Sundance is to understand how to be responsible for life, right? And so when I stood in front of that tree for the very first time, I felt this energetic bolt come out of my umbilicus, or what was where my belly button is, and connect itself to the tree. And so I realized that the tree became the placenta. So I was, the world is essentially, was the world, the universe. The tree was my new mother. You could say that. So, and this is my experience. This is my experience. So I can't say that this is true for everybody, but I realized, and I looked at it from that day on, I looked at trees in a much, much different way. I could go up to a tree, really hug a tree, and feel like I'm connected. I've prayed many times. I've been out in fields doing ceremonies for over 40 years, and I could tell you that I feel the sap of the trees is the blood in my veins, and vice versa. And I've talked to trees that way over the years. I said, relatives, my friends, that's how I talk to the trees. Your sap is my blood is your sap now. And when we go and gather, when we have to make any kind of structure, in particular when we're making sweat lodge, we gather that I talk to the trees, I talk to the plants that we're going to use, and I say this to them: I know someday I will be food for some of you. So someday I'm going to take some of you to make the structure, but someday I will give myself willingly. So part of our function now, at least with this, is to learn how to reciprocate, and especially with all the things that give to us with so much generosity, without ever asking for anything in return. So we have to learn how to be reciprocal with the earth, and this is one of the things that we have to instill, not only how we teach the kids, what we do, how we see the things, and we have to see these things not as objects, but as living, breathing beings. And part of our dilemma is that we're not in sync. We're asynchronous to the rhythms of the world, to the language of the world. We don't recognize the fact that they have language. I've been working, translating poetry from a dear friend of mine who unfortunately passed away 2 years ago. He was a Guatemalan poet, Maya Quiche. And for the Maya in particular, and almost all native peoples all over the world, it's the same thing. It's an extension of us, the world around us. The stones are alive, the trees are alive, the mountains are alive, the water is alive. And so we have to learn how to listen, how to really being able to observe. Umberto Cabal was his name, and he has beautiful poems, in particular about roots. And he said that one of my favorite poems of his is, "Roots tell us through the flowers what the earth is like on the inside." And in all the vernacular that I know from native peoples, again, from all over the world, everything is sacred. Nothing is not sacred. Everything is sacred. So that means that water is sacred, fire is sacred, earth is sacred, air is sacred. So we have to realize how the holy works. It doesn't work on a set of conditions, but it's a universality that we have to learn how to cultivate. So part of our job now is to go sit with the land, right? And what is the voice of the land? What is the story of the land? How does the land want us to interact? When I work with people, I usually give them 3 tasks. I say, go make friends with a stone, go make friends with a body of water, river, lake, ocean, and go make friends with a tree. So go sit there and tell your story to the tree. And it's really important because eventually it tunes you to the land where you're at. And you have to, and some people will have trouble with this, but you are, in some form, we are being asked to make relationship with the land around us. And you have to think about plants as, for instance, as having a global consciousness that we're not even aware of. But there's a consciousness in the forest that's really important to understand too. Because when you go there, you realize how complex it is and everything is interrelated, you know. But the consciousness of the trees happens in the forests here too. It's not just in South America, it's all over the world in the same way. There's no reciprocity by the people. They don't plant to replace, you know, they think of, we're like termites, bad termites that just eating everything up. And this is what we have to go back. Oh, let's figure out how to how to how to regenerate again, how to regenerate. I'll leave you with a friend of mine said this. This is a poem. Abrir la tierra con las manos, llenarse con su aroma, levantar la cara al cielo y comer el viento, eso es la paz, contestó la abuela. Open up the earth with your hands, get filled with its scent, with its aroma. Raise your face to the sky and eat the wind, that is peace, the grandmother answered. These are the words of Humberto Acabal. So I invite you all to go out there and stand in the ground, barefoot if possible, you know, open up the earth with your hands, get filled with its scent, raise your face to the sky and eat the wind.